A wiring method using 14/2 and 14/3 cables for controlling a fan and light combo with two three-way switches does meet the National Electrical Code requirements. Here's a detailed breakdown of the wiring configuration. Firstly, run a 14/3 cable containing a black wire, a red wire, a white wire, and a green or bare copper wire from the electrical panel to switch box 1. Secondly, run a 14/2 cable containing a black wire, a white wire, and a green or bare copper wire from switch box 1 to switch box 2. Thirdly, run a 14/3 cable containing a black wire, a red wire, a white wire, and a green or bare copper wire from switch box 2 to the fan and light combo. At the fan and light combo, make the following connections. Connect the black wire to the fan motor. Connect the red wire to the light fixture. Connect the white wire to the neutral terminal. Connect the green or bare copper wire to the ground terminal. You must use three-way switches at both switch locations. Ensure the switch boxes have adequate space for the wires and switches. This wiring method complies with National Electrical Code Article 300.3, the 1, which allows stranded wire in switch loops. Another approach is to use a 14/4 cable between the switch boxes and a 14/2 cable between the fan and light combo and one of the switch boxes. This method simplifies the wiring but requires a 14/4 cable which may not be readily available. Both wiring methods are acceptable and meet electrical code requirements. Choose the method that best suits your project's specific needs and circumstances. When implementing this wiring, start by running the 14/3 cable from the electrical panel to the first switch box. The 14/3 cable will carry the hot wire, neutral wire, and one of the traveler wires. At the first switch box, connect the incoming hot wire from the electrical panel to the common terminal of the three-way switch. Then connect the other two wires from the 14/3 cable to the traveler terminals and the same three-way switch. Next, run the 14/2 cable from the first switch box to the second switch box. This cable will carry the two traveler wires between the switches. Connect the two wires from the 14/2 cable to the traveler terminals and the three-way switch in the second switch box. Then run the 14/3 cable from the second switch box to the fan and light combo. At the second switch box, connect the hot wire from the 14/3 cable to the common terminal of the three-way switch. Connect the remaining two wires from the 14/3 cable to the fan and light combo according to the wiring diagram: black to the fan, red to the light, white to neutral, and green to ground. Ensure all connections are secure and properly insulated. When working with electrical wiring, it is important to prioritize safety. Always turn off the power to the circuit at the electrical panel before starting any wiring work. Use appropriate safety gear such as insulated gloves and safety glasses. If you are not comfortable working with electrical wiring, consult a qualified electrician. Understanding the color codes of electrical wires is crucial for safe and correct wiring. Black wires are typically used for the hot or live wire. White wires are used for the neutral wire. Green or bare copper wires are used for the ground wire. Red wires can be used for switch legs or travelers in three-way switch circuits. It is important to follow these color codes to avoid electrical shock and ensure the circuit functions correctly. When connecting wires, use appropriate wiring connectors such as wire nuts or crimp connectors. Make sure the connectors are properly sized for the gauge of the wires being connected. Twist the wires together tightly before applying the connector and ensure the connector is securely fastened. This will prevent loose connections, which can cause arcing, overheating, and electrical fires. When installing the switches in the switch boxes, make sure they are securely mounted and properly aligned. The switches should be flush with the wall and operate smoothly. Use appropriate screws to mount the switches and avoid over-tightening them, which can damage the switch or the switch box. When running cables through walls and ceilings, follow all applicable building codes and regulations. Use appropriate cable clamps or staples to secure the cables to the framing members. Avoid running cables over sharp edges or through areas where they could be damaged. When working in tight spaces, such as switch boxes, use needle nose pliers or other specialized tools to manipulate the wires and connectors. This will help you avoid damaging the wires or making incorrect connections. Before energizing the circuit, double-check all wiring connections to ensure they are correct and secure. Use a multimeter to test the continuity of the circuit and verify that there are no shorts or ground faults. If everything checks out, turn on the power to the circuit and test the operation of the fan and light combo. If the fan or light does not work, turn off the power and recheck the wiring. When troubleshooting electrical problems, always start by checking the simplest things first, such as the circuit breaker, the switch, and the wiring connections. Use a multimeter to test for voltage and continuity at various points in the circuit. If you are unable to identify the problem, consult a qualified electrician. When making changes to existing electrical wiring, always obtain the necessary permits and inspections from your local building department. This will ensure that the work is done safely and in compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. If you are not familiar with electrical codes and regulations, consult a qualified electrician or electrical inspector. When working with electricity, always be aware of the potential hazards and take appropriate precautions to protect yourself and others. Electricity can be dangerous, and it is important to treat it with respect. This method adheres to 2023 National Electrical Code Article 300.3. B1, which permits the use of single conductors as switch legs within a cable assembly. Always refer to the latest edition of the National Electrical Code and local amendments for the most up-to-date requirements. Remember to properly size the circuit breaker, protecting the circuit based on the ampacity of the 14-gauge wire. 14-gauge copper wire is typically rated for 15 amps. It is also critical to ground all metallic boxes and devices according to NEC 250. Always use appropriately listed electrical components for the intended application. This includes selecting the correct type of wire, switches, and junction boxes. Remember that electrical work can be dangerous and should only be performed by qualified individuals. If you're unsure about any aspect of the project, consult with a licensed electrician. This ensures compliance with local codes and safe installation practices. When installing the three-way switches, make sure the common terminal is correctly identified and connected to the appropriate wire. The common terminal is usually marked with a different color screw or has a marking indicating it is the common terminal. Incorrectly wiring the common terminal can cause the switches to malfunction. Always test the operation of the switches after installation to ensure they are working correctly. When connecting the wires to the terminals and the switches, use a screwdriver that is the correct size for the screw. Using a screwdriver that is too small can damage the screw head, making it difficult to tighten or loosen the screw. Using a screwdriver that is too large can damage the terminal on the switch. When tightening the screws and the terminals, do not over-tighten them. Over-tightening the screws can damage the terminals or the wires. Tighten the screws until they are snug, but not so tight that they strip the threads. When installing the fan and light combo, follow the manufacturer's instructions carefully. The instructions will provide specific details on how to assemble and install the unit. Make sure the fan and light combo is securely mounted to the ceiling joist. Use appropriate hardware to mount the unit, and make sure the joist is strong enough to support the weight of the unit. When connecting the wires to the fan and light combo, follow the wiring diagram provided by the manufacturer. The wiring diagram will show you which wires to connect to which terminals. Make sure all connections are secure and properly insulated. Before turning on the power to the circuit, double-check all wiring connections to ensure they are correct and secure. Use a multimeter to test the continuity of the circuit and verify that there are no shorts or ground faults. If everything checks out, turn on the power to the circuit and test the operation of the fan and light combo. If the fan or light does not work, turn off the power and recheck the wiring.